Hello and welcome back to our final um, lecture video dealing with Chapter 12, which has to deal with statement of cash flow. So, up to this point, we've seen how to um, format the statement of cash flow. We saw the importance of identifying which items from the balance sheet fall under each of those three activities. We saw how to put together the operating section of the statement of cash flow utilizing the indirect method. In this video, we're just going to go ahead and finish up and look at some ratios that we can use to analyze the statement of cash flow. Okay, so as we're looking at the statement of cash flow, one main important calculation is free cash flow. Free cash flow is the key that we use to determine what is the strength of the company's cash flow. Okay? Now, this method of utilizing free cash flow, it's less subjective than looking at the accrual net income based measures. Why? Because the accrual net income has all these other factors in there, all these non cash expenses, right? Now we're looking at just the cash flow, and we can see how strong is that company's cash flow. So, how do we calculate free cash flow? Well, it's easy. We take the cash flow from operating activities and we subtract out any capital expenditures, right? Did we buy any um, PP&E? Did we That's really what we're looking at, those capital expenditures. So this free cash flow gives us an indication of the company's cash flow that they have available to do other things after they replace the assets, right? So, what other things do we have that we may need to take care of after we buy assets? Well, we can invest that free cash flow into um, we can invest it into working capital, right? Like current assets, current liabilities, things like that. We can use that cash to pay down debt, pay dividends. Okay. The other two important um, ratios that we have, the first one is operating cash flow to current liabilities ratio, which is very, very important as we look at our operating activities based on our current liabilities as far as can we pay them as they come due. And then the last one that we have that we'll look at a little later is operating cash flow to capital expenditure ratio. Excuse me. So this operating cash flow to current liability ratio, right? This is very similar to what we learned previously, looking at the current ratio or that quick ratio. Okay, so it's just a measure based on cash flow. Is really all it is. This lets us know or gives us an indication: is the company able to meet its current liabilities? The next one we have is the operating cash flow to capital expenditure ratio. To calculate that, we take cash flow from operating activities and we divide it by the annual net capital expenditures. Okay? What this measure does is it allows us to determine what is a company's ability to finance capital expenditures only from operations. Okay? So that's kind of important, right? A company wants to expand its operations, right? We need to invest in more asset producing, or I'm sorry, revenue generating assets, right? Equipment, property, equipment. How are we going to finance this? Well, this equation allows us to determine if the cash flow from our operating activities, our key core business, does that generate enough cash for us to expend on capital expenditures? We're not going to get into the appendix looking at the direct method. Direct method's a lot more difficult. So we're just going to stick with the indirect method. Again, the key takeaway for you guys is knowing pretty much how to prepare the statement of cash flow using that indirect method. And what does it tell us, right? What does that cash flow from operations mean? What does cash flow from financing activities mean? What does cash flow from investing activities mean? And we'll go through a lot more of that in detail as we get through, or as we go through the demo videos. Okay? So thanks for tuning in, and the next series of videos will deal with homework and set you up to get your homework complete.